Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. And guys, I have a special treat for you this episode because I have on the other end of the miracle of Skype, cartoonist and creator of PIX, Mr. Gregg Schigiel. Hi, Greg.
Hello, Eric. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on your show.
Well, thank you. I'm super excited to have you on the show. This is something that our friend George from the George and Tony Entertainment Show helped set up. So shout out to George for that. So thank you, George.
Absolutely. Shout out to George. Indeed. Agreed. I'm agreeing with that.
And this is really kind of a dream come true for me, Greg, because I'm such a fan of PIX, the first volume of PIX One Weirdest Weekend of yours. And you have some exciting news for the people like me who are fans of that book and more generally your work. You've got PIX Volume 2 coming out, Too Cool for School, right?
Too Super for School.
I screwed that up. Too Super for School. It's also Too Cool for School, right?
Yes, I do. First of all, I have to let my blushing die down from your kind words about PIX Volume 1. And yes, PIX Volume 2, 2 years in the making. It's coming out May 3rd, 3 weeks from today, which is nuts. Because it was a book I've been working on drawing it for the past year. Well, I finished it in March, but took a year to create all the art for it, and then I was writing for probably 5 or 6 months before that, doing layouts and all that. So, yeah, an 18-month process to finally have this book out. And all those of you who read the first one and were patient enough and enjoyed it and waited for this one, I thank you. But I'm excited. I'm excited for people who haven't read it. Well, very few people have. People who read the first one and waited to see it, and people who are just catching on, because now the book is published at Image. It originally was self-published. And I'm excited for just more people to see it because more people are seeing it just by virtue of being published by Image versus me self-publishing. Although you saw it, what store did you get it at? I don't know if I ever asked.
I saw it in previews and ordered it. And I get my stuff from DCB Service. If you're familiar with them,
I am.
Yeah. So yeah, I've talked about this before on the show. And actually that's how I think George and I started talking was because of PIX. Because
really?
I think he somehow saw that I had done a sort of review, just not really review. It was more of I was so excited about the book, I wanted to talk about it on one of the episodes.
Yeah, it was a nice summary of what happens in it.
Yeah, I kind of tend to do that. So just because I like to talk about what's going on in it, and there's so much fun stuff, and we will talk about some of this stuff during this next hour or so. As we record this, Greg is busily drawing away. I want to talk to him about that too. But I only have him for a limited amount of time, and I don't want to keep him up too late because he's on the east side of the states and I'm on the west side.
But I'm a freelancer, so my hours are a mess.
Whatever you make of them, right?
Exactly.
See,
exactly.
I have an 8 to 5 job, Monday through Friday, and all this fun stuff that I get to do, like I'm doing right now. That's in the evenings or on the weekends. It's very limited when I
Sure.
can do it. So I'm really kind of jealous that you have the job that you have.
I thank you. Yeah, it's one of these weird jobs. I guess it's a job, sure, that sort of either takes up all my time or could take up none of my time. So, a day like today, I was sort of picking up things here and there. I would run an errand, come back, do some work, make a phone call, do some work. So I haven't been super productive today. So this will be nice while I sort of scribble and draw while we talk. But then, I'm up till 2 a.m, and then I did take an 8-minute nap today. I will admit to that.
Is that a cartoonist power nap?
No, if I'm really actually taking a nap, I go 15 to 20 minutes.
Oh.
If I really feel like I need that eye rest. And I was definitely doing that near the last couple months of working on PIX. But no, today I was watching the movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which is it's a very interesting movie about an 85-year-old guy in Japan in his sushi restaurant. And it's very soothing. So I started to sort of feel like I was being lulled. And I did not want to actually fall asleep, so I just set a timer for 8 minutes, closed my eyes. 8 minutes later, I was up, ate dinner, and got back to being non-horizontal.
And back to work, right?
What did I do? I guess I ate first, and then I came up and did some work, wrote some emails. Yeah, and then I watched Survivor, and now we're talking.
So what is it you are working on? If PIX Volume 2 is done, what is it you're working on right now?
I'm working on a job that pays money, because as of yet PIX doesn't. So right now I'm working on SpongeBob comics. I have a 2-page SpongeBob comic that I am penciling.
All right, and it's good that you just mentioned that, Greg. I just want to run through just a quick highlight, I guess, of your career. And I know I'm missing huge swaths of things, so please jump in if there's something you want to have mentioned here.
No problem.
I know that you worked at Marvel for several years, right?
I worked at Marvel from October of '97 to January of 2000, so about 2.5 years.
And I know you've talked about this. I'm jumping ahead of myself. You worked at Marvel. You started as an intern there, right?
Yes, I was an intern in the summer of 1996. So 21 years ago.
Wow.
I know. Tell me about it. And then I started working there a year and change later. After I graduated college, some opportunities opened up. Although interestingly enough, I graduated college, got my first job penciling a comic, finished that comic, got the job at Marvel.
Ah.
So there was a lot of fun twists and turns. And then while I was at Marvel, I also did pencil some comics. So yeah, I was there. My last day, I think, was January 28th, 2000, if memory serves, because then I started to jump the gun on what you might say next. I then started working for Nickelodeon on February 14th, 2000.
Okay.
In their consumer products licensing division, doing character art for a character named SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh,
Boom!
okay.
I brought it back.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious about that. Yeah, because I know you worked on SpongeBob SquarePants, and now it's called SpongeBob Comics, right?
Yes. So I started working at Nickelodeon in 2000, just doing character art for licensed products, so things that you'd find on a T-shirt or a backpack or stationery or napkins and that sort of thing. So it would be, Greg, we need 15 SpongeBob and Patrick poses for Valentine's Day, and I would do a bunch of sketches, and then they'd choose 5 and turn those into finished character art that could then be repurposed 1,000 times over. So that was my job. I did that. I drew SpongeBob characters, Jimmy Neutron characters, a little bit of Cat Dog, Invader Zim. Like, you just learn to draw in the style of the show and make it look right. What they call on model. So I did that, and while I was doing that, I would bother the people at Nickelodeon Magazine, because Nickelodeon Magazine had a comic section, and I wanted to do stuff there. I regularly pitched Pete and Pete comics to them, but Pete and Pete was not a live property at the time, so there really wasn't anything happening. And then eventually I started doing SpongeBob comics, Fairly Odd Parents comics, a couple of Zim things, and Jimmy Neutron comics. I think it started with Jimmy Neutron comics, and we just sort of were on. And then Nickelodeon Magazine closed, and in 2011, SpongeBob comics launched.
Ah, okay.
And as somebody that had been doing SpongeBob comics for the magazine, it was just sort of a natural transition. And yeah, I've been drawing SpongeBob since 2000, so 17 years of me and the sponge. He has paid my rent for many years, and I appreciate it.
Well, I know I have to admit I would not consider myself a fan of SpongeBob the character.
That's perfectly okay.
But my kids, my granddaughters, I've talked about Madison on the show quite a bit. She loves SpongeBob a lot, so I get to see it probably more than I would like. But that so the licensing stuff that you mentioned, that means that probably everyone who's listening to this episode has seen your work at some time or another.
If somebody has the DVD for SpongeBob the movie, they've seen my work, because I did the artwork that's on the cover. It's SpongeBob and Patrick running with the crown. And a bit of trivia about that piece of art. So SpongeBob's spots are in very specific locations. That's one of the things that you learn to do, is get the spots right. And that piece of art is flopped, and SpongeBob is not symmetrical. So on the cover to the DVD, SpongeBob is incorrect. It was not my fault. I drew it correctly, and somebody flipped the artwork. So SpongeBob's spots are in the wrong place.
So does things like that drive you crazy when the art gets messed up?
Yes. because nobody knows. It's that perception is 99% of the law. So if the art is wrong, then the person who drew it did it wrong. But that is not the case. It's that somebody flopped the artwork. And I even caught it. It was in previews, and I remember seeing it in like the back of the book. And I called the people at Nickelodeon and said, hey, I just saw the ad for this. The artwork is flopped. And they said, yeah, that's just the ad. It'll be fine on the actual thing. And it was not.
Oh.
Yeah. But hey, those people don't work there anymore. It's all water under the bridge. The movie still works on the DVD. It's all good.
That's right. They don't work there, but you do. So there you go.
Well, I work from home now. I left in June of 2002. I went full freelance.
Okay.
And have been working from home ever since, which is shocking. Like there are moments where I do the math. I'm like, I've worked out of my apartment for 15 years. That's weird.
So besides more recently SpongeBob and obviously PIX,
yes.
Is there anything else that my listeners might know you from or discover you through?
Sure. Let's see. In 2009 into 2010, I wrote an X-Babies miniseries called X-Babies Stars Reborn. Very proud of that. I don't think enough people read it, but I think it's on Marvel Unlimited. So if you have that, you can read it. It's 4 issues drawn by Jacob Shabbat, who's awesome. If you were reading comics at the end of 99, beginning of 2000, I drew a fairly infamous story that appeared in every single Marvel comic. It was a series of inserts of a Spider-Man anti-drug story called Fastlane. I drew that, and people reading comics in that era remember it and hate it. So that's a claim. That's a claim to fame. What I did the last issue of What If Volume 2, which was a Secret Wars issue that some people really like, that has a bit of a following. The first person I ever saw cosplaying as something I've designed was a character from that. It was like seeing a celebrity. Like I was setting up for a con and I saw this girl walk by dressed as one of the characters in that book, and I almost lost my mind. Like I was seeing a celebrity. It was very exciting. I chased her down. I'm like, excuse me, I designed what you're wearing. And she looked at me like I was crazy, and then we took pictures. It was fun.
That's great.
Beyond that, I'm trying to think of, in terms of comics work, those are like the big sort of like hallmark things that I did that I could think of. Yeah.
So nothing for the other big comic company, DC?
I did some licensed publishing stuff for them. So stuff in the style of Batman the Animated Series.
Yes, because I was looking at your website, and I want to talk about that specifically in a second. But yeah, I was looking through those, and I saw those pictures.
Yeah.
That you did. I'm like, this is awesome. Where can I find this stuff? So it was licensed material.
Yeah, that was for a company called Capstone. I think they're in Wisconsin or Minneapolis or something, and they do these storybooks, these DC superhero storybooks.
Okay.
They're chapter books with full page illustrations. And I think it was like 4 Batman ones and a couple of Superman ones. Those are fun. Those are a good time because it's just single illustration. You could draw Batman fighting the Joker and Clayface, and the Riddler was in one of them. Batmite was in one of them. So those are fun. And then I did a DC animated, what they call doodle books now. So it's like a coloring book, but there's blanks so you can draw in stuff. So it's like Batman and Superman or like Lex Luthor has stolen something. What did he steal? And you color in the Lex Luthor thing, and then you draw what he stole. Sort of a creative coloring book. So I did a Justice League doodle book that's out there somewhere. It's a big, chunky, thick thing.
Huh. I think I may have bought one of those for Madison, now that I'm thinking about it.
My name is in there if you look for it. If it's the same one, I worked on that. So yeah, I've done a bunch of licensed stuff through the years, which I cannot complain. It's a way to earn a living drawing pictures. So, and if it's a style that I can adapt to, and the DC animated stuff I sort of take to pretty readily, I'm all for it. So let's talk about that for a second before this is going to be a bunch of starts and stops here, but you're saying all these really interesting things that I want to examine a little bit more. So, sure.
As a cartoonist working for these other companies doing licensed material, like you said, you have to adapt to the style of that particular character.
Right.
How difficult is that for you?
It depends on the property. So some properties I take to pretty quickly. So the DC animated stuff, because that started when I was in high school, and I started sort of glomming onto that style and drawing, looking at Bruce Timm stuff and sort of getting a feel for it. That was a relatively easy shift. I think my style is already kind of cartoony. It's not that distant. It's not that far a stretch for me to just sort of go a little more graphic with the lines, simplify things. When I left Nickelodeon, Avatar: The Last Airbender was starting, and they were showing me the model sheets to possibly get practiced up on that, and that was almost too close stylistically. Where if I started to tweak the way I was drawing to get to that, I felt like it would be affecting the way I actually draw. So that one was tough. That one I actually sort of stepped away from, which might have been a mistake. I probably could have been drawing Avatar stuff right alongside SpongeBob stuff, and it would have been a nice other venue. But the cartoonier stuff I tend to sort of do more easily because it's not me necessarily changing the way I draw. It's just drawing to that style. I don't know if that made any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But, I draw, there's a natural way in which I draw, and I could add more or less detail and sort of adjust it accordingly. There's like a spectrum on it. But then my natural way of drawing looks nothing like SpongeBob. But I can look at SpongeBob and practice it and figure out the mechanics of how those figures are built and then redraw them over and over again. So it's all a construction thing. Under every drawing is the underdrawing, and you've probably seen like how to draw so-and-so, and they start with like a square or a circle. Like once I learn that stuff, and I can do it over and over again, you can sort of then manipulate those shapes and those forms to do nearly anything and draw the thing the right way on model, rather, again and again and again. So it really does depend on the property, and if it's something that I can break down into its components parts and isn't too difficult. Hold on, my phone is ringing and I'm turning it off. My apologies. Normally the ringer is off. I don't know why that happened. All right, ringer's off. My apologies to you and your listeners.
It's all right.
I don't know how the ringer came on. It's always off. So that was shocking to me as anybody. Will that get cut or do you edit? I don't even know if you edit.
That depends.
Okay.
Normally I would edit something like that, but I like the humor about it. So
sure, no problem.
We'll probably keep it in.
It'll keep me seeming like a human person.
Exactly.
Which is good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're doing fine as a human person, Greg. Come on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So does that mean back to what we were saying about adapting your style? Does that mean that PIX is more or less your natural drawing style, or did you change some things for that particular character?
No, PIX is probably in the strike zone of how I draw. I guess it really does depend on. So if I were doing a book for Marvel or DC, a basic comic book, I'd probably try and make it more quote unquote realistic because I imagine that's what they would want. And then a part of me, the other side of me, would be like, just do cartoony. That's how you like to draw. Just go with it. So I kind of, in my own head, am always sort of flowing back and forth. I guess probably the best example of what my natural style would be is on my website. There's the convention sketches. Mm-hmm. Like that's the stuff I'm just drawing on the spot. So there's no time to think about what I'm doing and refining it. So in that case, that's probably what I naturally draw like. That loosey sort of quick drawing style. The PIX stuff is that cleaned up, refined, trying to keep it consistent throughout the book. Although even there, if anybody saw the mini comics I did back in 2008 versus the actual books now, there's a difference in that stuff I was really keeping a very tight ink line, making sure everything was locked in, super strong. And then with the new books, I'm inking looser. I'm not as concerned with lines connecting and sort of, I think there's more zip to the artwork when I just ink faster. Mm-hmm. I spend more time on the pencils, make sure the proportions of everything, but then when I start inking, it becomes a very quick rat-a-tat kind of a thing. Because I think it gives it life.
Yeah, I think I noticed that a little bit. Greg was kind enough to let me read volume 2 before it's out. And I think I noticed a little bit of difference there between volume 1 and volume 2. Is that correct?
I would say the difference is even stronger between. So in the back of volume 2, in the PDF I sent you, there's like there's a story in volume 2 that I did once before in 2009 as backups. If you look at that stuff, it's tiny. So if you zoom in on your PDF, you'll see the difference. Mm-hmm. Like there, the lines are much tighter. I was using different tools. And you could just see the difference. Volume 1 to volume 2 is just me being a improving as an artist over, a 2-year span. And then just the characters slightly changed. Like I looked at volume 1, I'm like, okay, Cherry does look a little different. I mean, it's super subtle, but there's a slight difference between, Pix and her friends and their sort of model in volume 1 versus volume 2. Just because, you just start making little tweaks here and there. I know the basic shapes of their features and their noses and stuff, but little things sort of get shifted as you sort of flow along, either out of efficiency or just forgetting what they look like and not checking or whatever the case may be. I think they look consistent, though. I think you wouldn't be surprised by, wait, this doesn't look anything like, in volume 2, I did have to go back to Seth's original hair for the prologue. And that was sort of a throwback. I was like, oh, yeah, yes. I did draw his hair like that. And I had to look at that because I forgot how I had drawn it. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, because I keep giving the characters haircuts and changing them around just because it's for me, it's fun to do that, to sort of just switch it up a little bit. Pix's hairdo changes with each new sequence. I give her a different sort of arrangement for her hair. I don't know. I think it's fun.
See, I noticed that, especially with Seth. And
right.
I want to back up after this to just to have you briefly talk about, who Pix is and her friends and all that stuff. But yeah, that's one of the things I noticed, as you said in the prologue. And then I love those little things that you just talked about, how you change things up, because, visually for me, it makes it more interesting on the page, even if it's not an overt kind of a change. But
sure.
We're talking about 2-dimensional images that you've drawn, but it makes it more realistic for me that these characters have different clothes, they have different hairstyles, they're different shapes. It's one of the things I love about the PIX books is that you show different people, in all different ways. That's fantastic.
Thank you. I do make a concerted effort to, I want everybody to look different. Like I can draw people to look different, so I might as well draw them to look different. So Pix and all of her friends have different body types and different hairdos and different noses, and they look like different people. And then the background characters are fun to just sort of create new background people. Like, all right, let's throw a ponytail here and let's put, whatever, spiked hair here, and just sort of play around. Keeps it, again, from being monotonous. Like, all right, if you keep drawing the same thing over and over. Funny thing about the outfits. So in volume 1, I noticed in one sequence that Cherry was wearing pink shirts in 2 separate scenes, like back to back. And in my mind, she would never wear the same color twice. So actually, like right before I went to the printer, I went in and changed a bunch of colors so that she'd have different colors. And in the second book, I was going through it after it was all colored, and I noticed that she was wearing a tank top 3 scenes in a row. And I'm like, she wouldn't. And there's a sequence where I went back into the art, changed her outfit, put her in overalls, and like put her in a bow. It was a whole thing. It took me a couple of hours to go in there and just sort of tweak out 4 panels, I think, of just her outfit, like a lunatic. Nobody else is gonna. But those are the things that, like, in the last few weeks, I was going in and making these tiny, tiny tweaks to things like their clothes and making sure that I didn't forget her freckles anywhere, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, it's that level of detail. Your attention to that detail is what I'm trying to say. Yes. I think it shows in the work.
So to go to your point, though, so you were saying how like it's realistic even though it's cartoony. One of the things I like to stress a lot when I talk about comics and talk to people about comics is, you buy into the reality of the comic if you sell the reality of the comic. So if the world looks and plays by the rules of that world, and you do not betray the rules of that world, and everything visually lands, that's going to be realistic in the sense of that world. So the example I always give, and maybe it doesn't quite work here, but I'm going to give it anyway, is in The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch's weakness is water. And you accept it because that is the world that you are given. Like, in this world, this is her weakness. You don't question it. You're like, that's just how it is. And they do a nice job of setting that up so that when it happens, you're like, oh my goodness, look at that. Water was the weakness. So I like that kind of storytelling where the rules of the world are set up, or the visuals or the art direction of the world is set up such that you can go into it and not feel like you're being distracted by something or that doesn't fit, or like everything fits. That made sense. I know
Yeah.
that made sense. Yeah.
That totally made sense. And this is a great segue to talk about PIX in general, because I want to come back to this very idea, Greg,
Okay.
that you just brought up, because there's some amazing world building, or at the very least rules that you set up for this world.
Oh, I'm interested to hear about this.
That I find interesting and
All right.
fascinating. So, could you? We've talked a lot around it.
Oh, I should describe what it is, right?
Well, what is PIX for someone who may not? For those of you listening that are crazy enough to not have read PIX, One Weirdest Weekend yet, and of course you once you read that, you will be compelled to read Too Super for School Volume 2 when it comes out on May 3rd, right before Free Comic Book Day.
Yes, indeed.
So Greg, give us elevator pitch, or however much you want to spend on talking about what PIX is for the
Sure.
uneducated.
Uninitiated. Let's be.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the better word.
Yeah.
We should go with that one.
Okay. So PIX is a graphic novel series that follows the adventures of PIX, who is a teenage girl with superpowers, wears a costume, is a straight up superhero, saves the day, does the whole thing. She also claims and believes that she is the daughter of the king of the fairies, making her a fairy princess. So now, while her superhero stuff is there for everybody to see, and they're like, okay, she clearly has superpowers, she is flying. When she starts talking fairy princess, eyebrows get raised. People start to wonder if she's maybe a little off in her own world and taking this thing a bit too far. So in volume, tonally, I've described it as Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Alice in Wonderland meets Archie comics. Or if you told the Spider-Man story through the lens of a Disney princess story. So it has like the tropes of superhero comics. You know, the hero does a thing and then is blamed for something else and sort of can't catch a break, and the very classic superhero thing. She doesn't have a secret identity, but there's still that notion of she's keeping secrets from people. She's, has to do these things that a superhero does. The tropes are there. I like superhero tropes, even though I don't attach all of them. She has a superhero code name. It's just a version of her name, but she goes by this code name. Her full name is Emmeline Laurel Pixley. She goes by Pix. She wears the costume all the time, for the most part. It's funny, I say she wears the costume all the time, but in Volume 1, she wears the costume for like the first 60 pages, and then things happen that she's not wearing the costume. And then in Volume 2, so Volume 1 is her fighting a bunch of monsters and weird stuff, and craziness is happening. And you can hear Eric talk about that on the podcast episode where you talked about Volume 1. So I won't talk about that anymore. I'll let people listen to you talk about it. And in Volume 2, it continues her story where we see her go back to school, because Volume 1 takes place during spring break and she's back at school. And we learn that having superpowers and wearing a costume, as awesome as we all think it is, isn't awesome for her. And things are not great at school. Teachers and faculty think she's a menace and she's just causing problems and she's going to get everybody hurt. And then other students think she's a loser who makes up stories about being a fairy princess for attention and wears the costume for attention, and is just surprisingly seen. Because again, we love comics and superheroes, so it is surprising to say, like, well, if I went to school with a superhero, I'd think they were awesome. At Pixar School, it is the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
People think less of her and kind of just would rather her not be around. And in book 2, things happen in the first 50 or so pages that make her say, you know what? I'm going to try to be an ordinary teenager. And that is sort of the thrust of Volume 2, without spoiling too much more. But, things don't go as she would want them to go, because that would make for a boring comic book. If she just became ordinary and everything worked out, then what's the point? So,
Right.
I won't tell you what happens. You know what happens because you've read it, Eric. But I hope I hope it worked where there's a nice series of sort of ups and downs, and when you're feeling up, I sort of take it out from under you, and
Mm-hmm.
and there's surprises and there's new stuff. And in Volume 2, the question of whether or not she is a fairy princess does get answered. This is not the TV show Lost. answer some questions. We get to it. I believe it's on page 180, if I remember correctly. So the answer's in that book. I won't tell you what the answer is, but it's in that book. How was that for? Did I cover everything? I think I did, right?
Yeah. It's really funny. When how'd you describe it? Buffy meets
Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Alice in Wonderland meets the Archie gang.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I totally get that vibe, especially in volume 1. I'm very pleased to hear that you say Buffy and the Archie gang, because I really got that vibe when I read volume 1, and I was going to ask you if that was a particular way that you were going with that with the book, or at least drawing some sort of the word escapes me now, but
analog, parallel.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sure. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, when I first conceived of the whole thing, the Archie part wasn't in it. It was just Buffy the Vampire Slayer if she had gone to Wonderland. So just weird things happen, and she has to deal with these weird things, and she's like, a defender against weirdness. And then as I built the cast and sort of decided on the tone for it, the Archie kind of crept in, where my rule just doing the book was, if it could appear in an Archie comic, it can appear in PIX, to keep it at the age level I want it to be at. So that was sort of just me having a regulator of what will these kids talk about? Like, yes, they're in high school, and there are some high school things that get into sex and drugs and those sorts of things. And then there's Archie, which also takes place in high school, and they kiss. And that's where the line stops. So I kept that as my sort of parameters of the spirit of the tone of all the high school stuff. And then it just, by doing that, I then designed some of the cast as sort of homages to. So Pix's best friends are Cherry and Reggie, and they are in some way visually sort of a nod to Archie and Jughead.
Yes.
So there's that going on, and there's a lot of in bits that I throw in, again, to keep myself entertained. And I keep debating whether I'm going to make a contest out of volume 2, a little scavenger hunt. Like, if you can find all my references, there's probably like 30 some references in there of just like, what 2 panels have references to Saturday Night Live sketches, because they're in there. Things like that. So I may or may I have to make that list, but I think that would be a fun. I don't know what the prize would be, because there's no original art. I do everything on a computer. So I'm not sure what the prize is if you catch all of these things, but I think it could be a fun thing for kids' parents who, want something else to do with a comic book.
Well, obviously now I'm going to have to go back and reread volume 2 several times just to get those references.
There's a bunch of them, and some of them are in the art, some of them are in the dialogue, some of them are on posters in the background. There's a lot of, there's a bunch of stuff in there. So
yeah, now that you mentioned the background, that's one of the things I love to do, especially when I have a book that I'm reading digitally, is to zoom in on those panels. And there was a particular scene that you had in volume 2 where I saw a bunch of books in the background. I'm like, I wonder what Gregg did in there. And so I zoomed in on that and looked at all of the book titles, and I saw a particular one, and I know George is going to be happy to see that.
Yes. Yeah. It's a bookshelf. I mean, that whole page is a bunch of references to podcasts and some other friends' books and stuff. But there's a bookshelf of podcasts and podcast references. And at some, I know I left shows off, but I get a certain of just like, all right, let's see what I can do with this bookshelf. And I hope they're legible. I don't even know if when it prints it'll be, because it's blue on blue.
Yeah.
So I think it will be legible. We're going to find out, but you can read it digitally.
I will be, well, I pre-ordered volume 2.
Thank you. You're very kind.
I'll be getting that. And I got to go back and tell the good people at DCBS that they need to order me another copy, because I'm going to give a second volume to my granddaughter, Madison.
That is very kind. You're too kind.
And I want to get to this in a second, Gregg, because Madison had a bunch of a few questions about volume 1, because she read it just recently, and she wanted me to let you know some of the things that she thought about the book.
I cannot wait for this.
I'm
being completely sincere. This is thrilling to me.
But first, I want to go back to the characters a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned how it's Cherry, right? Not Sherry?
Right. Her name is Sherilee, but she goes by Cherry.
Cherry, right.
Yeah.
and there's Reggie, whom, by the way, I love her. She's probably my favorite character in the books.
Thank you. I like her bit in book 2.
Yes.
In book 1, she is the nice friend who's sort of there as just the nice friend. And then but there's stuff in book 1 that is setting up book 2. If you actually go back, there are little things in there that I knew what happened in book 2 was going to happen. So I was setting a little bit up in book 1, and I kind of like her metamorphosis, and I still like writing Cherry because she's the one that
so
says
much fun.
Yeah, she's the one that says everything. But it was I enjoyed doing to Reggie what I was able to do in book 2. I feel like I'm speaking in such vague terms, but I think she becomes more likable for sure. I feel the scene with her and Pix just in the hall, where they're going back and forth. Like, I enjoyed, there's not much visual happening there. They're just talking, but like that's like her act 2 starts there kind of a thing. And she grows. And then, there's that one splash page, right? With Reggie.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You surprised me with that, actually.
Okay, good.
I thought the character was going somewhere else, given some of what I thought were clues in book 1.
That's good.
So that was intentional.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
that
we can
was
speak in more specifics when we stop recording. But if I'm understanding what you were thinking, I believe I know what you might have thought, and I'm glad to have surprised you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But regardless of where I was assuming things were going, that was a lovely scene, and I just thought it was great. I absolutely love the relationship between all of these friends, especially the girls. Pix, Reggie, and Cherry. I know you did the books with, or I think anyway, you did the books with a certain age range in mind.
Yeah.
And so I get that. I get why you would portray these characters in this way, but I love it because there's no drama. I mean, there's always a little bit of drama when you're that age, right?
Sure.
But you're not hyping the drama. You're not making it the story, which I think a lot of young adult, I'll just throw that term out there for lack of a better term, but young adult stories tend to hype up the melodrama.
Sure.
And I don't see that so much in this work, and I love that. These girls talk to each other, except when they don't.
Yes. There's your drama.
But they're quick to forgive because they're friends. They don't hold grudges, at least not for very long. I just really like that positive take on young teen characters.
I appreciate. So to the age group thing. So there's YA, which is young adult, and then there's this category called middle grade, at least in library speak.
Yes.
So PIX is in that middle grade world. That's where it lives. So things like sort of your Judy Blume books. There's an author I really like named E.L. Konigsberg who wrote From the Mixed Up Files of Basil E. Frankenweiler. It's fairly notable. It's about these kids that run away and live in a museum. The Madeline L'Engle books. What am I thinking? Why is the name blanking? I mean, Swiftly Tilting Planet, Wind in the Door. What's the first one? A Wrinkle in Time.
Wrinkle in Time, yeah.
Like those books, those sort of books where it normally stars a 13-year-old kid and they're having some sort of adventure. Like those are the kinds of books I still like as a grown man. So I like the spirit of those books. As a kid, I read Power Pack and I loved it. So the spirit of that kind of comic very much influences PIX and the tone and the style and what I'm going for. So the drama is there, but again, going back to that Wizard of Oz thing, the drama means the world to them, like the tiny things that, we as adults might be like, oh, that's charming. But for them, it really, it's like, this is big stuff. You know what I mean? Like, this person hasn't called me in 3 days. What's going on? Like, that's a big deal. Whereas if you're doing something in the YA field, you are getting into that more. Again, it's young adults. You're dealing with more adult things that older teenagers are handling. And I'm sort of playing the characters are high school age, but they're sort of dealing with junior high school stuff to really parse it into very mechanical terms and take all the joy out of it.
Yeah. But like I said, I love it. Yeah, it's, I guess I'm looking at it. It's really charming, from my perspective, being a somewhat older than middle school age person.
Sure. Oh no, look, again, the goal was to make something that is, I like charm, I like quirk, I like those things. So if I can achieve that degree of if I can stick some kind of landing there, then I feel like I'm doing what I want to be doing. I mean, I would arguably almost want to go quirkier and weirder, because the things I really love are super quirky, not super, but like I love The Adventures of Pete and Pete. Joe versus the Volcano. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but it's
a long time
so
ago,
trippy
yeah.
and weird. Like I like that stuff. Like, that stuff sort of tickles my brain the way I like to have my brain tickled. So I want to do more stuff like that. I think book 1 is more of that. I think just the weirdness of it all.
Mm-hmm.
But then I get caught up in sincerity and heart and want, telling stories, and I sort of put the surreal stuff a little to the side, and you try to balance surreal and real. I we'll see what happens in book 3. We'll see who wins the battle.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things I wanted to touch on too, was book 1 is very much like the like the subtitle says, one weirdest weekend.
Yes.
PIX has a very weird weekend with a bunch of weird things going on. And this is where I'm going to come back to like the rules of the world you set up.
Sure.
In a second. But like I said, I think you mentioned this already. In book 2, the tone kind of shifts a little bit to a little more serious stuff, but there's still humor in it. And that's one of the other things I really like about reading these 2 PIX books was there's all this goofy superhero fantasy type stuff going on, mixed with teenage, middle school drama type stuff. But you throw in a bunch of humorous things, whether it's a bit of dialogue or it's a visual gag that you have in the panel. So how much does humor inform your work? Are you just a fan of comedy in general, or is it just the nature of working on PIX that brings that out?
I'm very much a fan of comedy. I would argue that humor doesn't so much influence my work as much as influence my life. I just, I like things that are funny. I don't always know what the funny thing was in the book. Like, I think things are cute or charming, and some things I mean as a joke, and some things I just mean as like a fun bit of business. So, when I've heard people say like this book is really funny, and that almost surprises me because that wasn't the focus. But I love to hear it, because that means I'm doing something. Like I'm getting something right, where there's humor in the situation. It's more sitcom-y than like a ha-ha funny comic book. But no, I'm glad to hear it. I think there is some funny bits of business. The interactions with the kids and sort of how they talk to each other. I try and get some jokes in there that read as jokes. It's tricky in a comic because you have no sound, you have none of those things. So you just have to pace. If you pace your panels right, you can sort of deliver the joke. So yeah, no, humor is it informs so much of everything I do. I once a year I bake a bunch of cookies for a party I have, and the names for the cookies I try to make charming or funny. So like I made a cookie that had chopped up Swedish fish and chocolate chips, and it was a fish and chips cookie. Yeah. There are sometimes the name of a thing will come to me before I've even made the thing. Yeah. So yeah, humor is very much, I watch comedy, I listen to comedy podcasts. I mean, if you look at that shelf in that page, most of those are comedy podcasts. Almost, I would say 90% of them are, maybe 95% are all comedy podcasts in some capacity. And then there's a couple of food ones, and then a couple of book ones. And then I think 2 political ones. But yeah, it's almost exclusively comedy podcasts. It's kind of just always flooding my brain with stuff I think is funny. I mean, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, for 2 years I did a web comic called Stick Figure Night Live, where I would watch Saturday Night Live, and as I watched it, I was drawing the show, like live as I watched it. I could only do it for 2 years. It was exhausting. But just in terms of my how much I key into comedy, although some people don't think Saturday Night Live is funny, that's a whole other conversation. The fact is, I do like comedy.
That's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's actually one of the things I saw on your website, and I was going to ask you about because I can't, I'm not an artist. I'm barely a writer myself. I cannot imagine sitting down at 11. What is it? Does it come at 11:30?
Yes.
11:30 at night, and drawing what you're seeing as it happens like that. And you did it for 2 years.
2 seasons, yeah.
Oh, two. Okay,
yeah.
But still,
so in
amazing.
fairness, I didn't always watch it at 11:30. Sometimes I'd be out and I've recorded it, but once I hit play, I would go the whole thing. Like I would sit there for the 90 minutes and draw. And yeah, it just got tiring. And then at a certain point I realized I wasn't even looking at the screen. I'd like look up to get the framing and just start drawing the stick figures and then waiting for like what the lines were going to be to summarize the sketch in one panel. That's pretty much what I was basically doing, a panel per sketch, except for the news. And that became this technique of doing one wide panel and just having the jokes sort of stream. I mean, the format, once I figured out the format, it did work. But yeah, it was an interesting experiment. I think I only paused it 3 times over the 2 seasons.
And that's why you did it though, was just, I'm going to try this thing out.
Yeah, I wanted to try it out. I thought it would be a big web hit, make me rich, get me invited to all the parties. It didn't, but there were people that read it, and there were people that were like strangers that were reading this thing. So that was cool. It just, at a certain point, it was affecting my social life because I'd be somewhere and it would be a Saturday night and people would want to watch the show. And I'm like, I have to watch it all in one shot and I have to draw it at the same time. And I was becoming a buzzkill. And I feel like it was affecting my ability to enjoy the show. Like I really wasn't watching anymore. I was just transcribing a 90-minute sketch show in sketches. Yeah. It's very meta.
But it's people need to go check this out. And since we're on the topic, so this is at hatterentertainment.com.
Yes. HATTER entertainment.com. That's sort of my hub. And from there, you can get to everything else.
Yeah. So I keep meaning to go back to this other thing, but since we're here, why Hatter Entertainment? And your logo is the hat, like reminiscent of the Mad Hatter from.
Then you have answered the question in the question.
You just like that?
I love Alice in Wonderland. I read it in high school for the first time, and it just knocked me out. Just everything about it. I read it. It was assigned to us in school. I started reading it, and I finished it that night. Like I just burned through it, and it just again lit up all those things. That quirky, that weirdness, just lit up everything in my brain. And in college, I was debating between whether I was going to call my company Hatter Entertainment or Cheshire Communications. And I sort of went back and forth, and I settled on Hatter because the logo looked cooler, and I like hats. I've always liked hats. I was actually just talking about, I do a monthly newsletter, and in this month, the April newsletter, was a tribute to Chuck Barris, the host of The Gong Show, who recently passed away, and who I'm a big fan of. And I just remember as a kid, he would host that show and wear hats low over his face, and he had the hat rack in the background. And even as a kid, I'm like, that's the coolest thing. Like just to have all those hats, and he was just playing dress up and acting a fool. Like I love it. I still love. I've been watching episodes on YouTube, and it holds up. That show is delightful. So yeah, the Mad Hatter, that scene in the Disney movie is hilarious.
Yes,
the scene in the book is really good. Like it just. Yeah, it just lights all those, and then it for me, it is an exemplar of a fine illustrated entertainment book, which is what I hope to do with my comics: is make quality, good illustrated entertainment products with words and pictures telling a story. So yeah, it all starts from the Hatter in Alice in Wonderland and that Alice in Wonderland thing. I mean, for years I read Alice in Wonderland once a year, like just to sort of do it again. But I haven't reread it in a long time. There's no time to reread stuff. There's so much new stuff coming out that all the things I want to reread, I'm like, I could reread that, or I could watch this TV show that everybody's talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I watched the show. I'm
hear
like, I
ya.
should have just reread the thing that I wanted to read.
Yeah. Well, you've got one up on me. I've always wanted to read the original story, but I never have. But I'm a huge fan of the Disney movie. I love that one. And whenever I talk about that with friends or family, you know, especially those that have kids, and you know, it seems like most kids, at least kids raised in America, they go through a Disney phase
Sure.
at the very least, and no one seems to be as enamored with Alice in Wonderland as I am.
It's a very strange movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's based on a very strange story. So the narrative is weird. It's hard. She's a weird character to root for because she's a little snobby at the beginning and she's sort of going through this weird stuff. So it's harder to sort of latch on to her. You sort of have to like the weirdness. You have to like the world, I think, to like that movie and just sort of take yourself on that ride. Yeah, I do like that movie a lot. It is for all kinds of reasons. I don't know if it ever gets into my top 5, and it's hard for me to even make the top 5. But I mean, I've seen all of them, and I always say Pinocchio is near the top. The Lion King is up there. I like the music in the Jungle Book a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the design in Sleeping Beauty is gorgeous. Like, there's so many things about all these different movies that, you know, Beauty and the Beast I watched like once a week in high school. Just that had the VHS tape. I throw it in to go to sleep. So like I just know it so well. Like I know all these movies. And then there's like the character design in Robin Hood is super cool. Like all the, you know, the animals and it's just like, yeah, all that stuff sort of is in my brain, sort of dancing around. Fox and the Hound will make you cry every time.
Oh yes.
Dumbo will make you cry every time. Like it's, yeah. But Alice in Wonderland there is a bit of an emotional sort of wall with Alice in Wonderland because it's so weird. And it's so just sort of things are changing. And it is a dream. It's watching a dream. So I can see why people don't just sort of glom onto that as opposed to one of these movies where there's a legit hero. Whether it's, you know, any of the princesses. I mean, Alice is not one of the princesses. Like they've got the pantheon of princesses. She's not one of them, which makes sense. She's not the princess of anything. But like the princesses there's like a real arc to them. And Alice's arc is sort of I don't feel like reading. Hey, what's that? I'm distracted by this rabbit. Everything goes haywire. Everybody wants to kill me. Oh, it was all just a dream. It's a weird bit of business.
Yeah, that's true.
Know? So I can see why it might not just sort of it's for a specific audience, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, regardless,
we love it.
I think they're crazy. Yeah, yeah.
We're all mad here.
Good one.
Thank you.
Since we're just talking about Disney animal creatures,
yep.
Now I'm going to circle back to the thing that I keep wanting to come back to.
Yes.
You have some interesting animals in Volume 1 of PIX.
Yep.
You've got Bonus, which is the dog of the neighbor boy that PIX sometimes babysits.
Yes.
And what's really cool about, and this goes back to the whole rules of the world thing. In this world, Bonus can talk to, I've forgotten the boy's name now. Noah, thank you.
Yep.
And Noah understands him. And there's a point in the book, in the story, where Bonus talks to Pix, and Bonus makes a very specific reference to the fact that he's talking to her, which is why which is why Pix can understand him.
Right.
And did I read that correctly? It's very specific.
So. I have to double check. Hold on. I wrote this a while ago. Yeah, the bit there was, okay, so the bit there is I wanted it to be unclear one of these things where like, is the kid crazy? He's talking to this dog like he understands it. And then as it ties into why the kid is taken, there's a question as to who's the one can actually understand the other one. Can the kid understand the dog? Can the dog understand the kid? So in that sequence where Bonus is talking to Pix, it's Bonus saying, it wasn't Noah talking to me. I was talking to him. Like I'm the one that can talk I'm the one that can talk cross species.
Ah, okay.
So Bonus is the one with the powers.
Yes, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you also have a monkey that can talk.
There it gets squirrelier because then it's just animals talking to each other.
Right.
because Noah can't understand the monkey and can't understand the other animals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you have again, so you have a talking dog, you have
Yes.
a talking monkey who
Yes.
has some nefarious plans.
Oh, it's a bad monkey.
It's a bad monkey. Yeah.
That's a bad monkey.
You also have a bear
Yeah,
show up.
I do.
And I know you, if I remember correctly, on a different podcast, you have a sort
Bears
of
are
love.
better. Yeah, bears are better than monkeys.
Yes.
And every opportunity I have to show that, I will. So bears beat monkeys. If this were rock, paper, scissors and you threw monkey, I would throw bear and I would win. By my rules of bear, monkey, what's the other? Throw another animal in there.
Frog.
All right, yeah. Oh, bear wins. Easy. Monkey might beat frog, come to think of it.
Yeah. Well, you had me
But
on the spot there because there's a frog in the book as well. But
Yes. There's a frog and there's an owl.
an owl, that's right. The owl.
Yeah. Yeah, there are 5 animals at certain points in this book, and
Yeah.
they all talk in various degrees to various sets of criteria.
Oh, and there's a bunny that makes an appearance too.
Yes, that's true. Yes, I
Which-
guess that would be 6 animals. No,
Cutest-
yeah.
Cutest damn bunny, I have to say.
Aw, shucks. I do like drawing animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There
okay.
are far fewer animals in book 2, and I kind of
Yes,
I
I was
miss
going
it.
to say that.
yeah.
Yeah. But that's okay. Still,
We get a
it's
couple.
still
Get a couple animals
Mm-hmm.
during the prom. Some animal action.
Mm-hmm.
Those are fun to do. Kind of, we're keeping it very. We're like it's teasing what happens.
Yes,
Like what
that's
animals at the prom? You'll see.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, you set up these rules for this world. With there's talking animals. Pix is the superhero who says she's also a fairy, which that's one of the other things I love about this world is that people, especially in book 2, when you read the reaction of the adults at the school, especially, they're like they don't really seem to care that Pix can fly, although they don't want her to.
Right.
They're more concerned about this, and some of her peers too. They're more concerned about this whole fairyland business.
Yeah, they think she's troubled. They think she's got real mental problems, and that
Yeah.
she's hiding other stuff. And whether she is or isn't, well, we find that out in book 2. Yeah.
Exactly. But I love that dichotomy of they're willing to accept this part, this fantastical part, but this other thing that's just a little too far for them.
And that definitely plays to my concept of, you set the rules of the world, because on the outset, you'd be like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they accept one and not the other? And the answer is, that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people will read it and accept that, and some people will, people that wonder why Batman used to wear his underwear on the outside are going to question the reality of it. And hopefully by the time you get into enough pages, you'll say like, all right, I guess this is just how the rules are in this. And I hope in book 2, when the Shannon shows up and she lays out her case against Pix, I hope that sort of clarifies the general dynamic of how this world sees Pix. Because that, to me, that was an important sequence of getting that right. And my friend Chris Girusso, who does the G-Man books, was very helpful in sort of setting that stuff up and saying, you need to make this clearer because what about this, this, and this? And sort of we went back and forth. And he was very helpful in that regard. I had a few people who were very helpful, read early drafts and helped me tweak certain scenes to make them hit harder, bring the emotional beats in, and make everything count as I wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
So props to them. They're all thanked in the back of the book. They know who they are.
Yeah.
I would name them, but none of your listeners would know who I'm talking about, so it would be wasted airtime.
Yeah. Okay, so since we're talking about some of the fantastical elements,
Yes, bring the
I
questions.
got to ask you, and this is specifically one of Madison's questions for you.
Perfect.
Why the magic 8-ball monster
Okay.
in book 1?
Okay. I have 2 answers for this.
Okay.
Answer 1, it's a visual that I've just had in my head, and I wanted to draw it. It was a neat idea that I had in my head, and I wanted to have her fighting that with a Q-tip. I just thought that was funny and weird and cool looking. I have come up with a secondary reason. You'll find that out in book 3.
Oh, Greg.
Sorry. But as I was working on book 2, I came up with some stuff that then I was realized I could pull from book, because originally that whole sequence was just, hey man, stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
She flew through this crowd. She gets shrunken down. She finds this monster. That's just weird stuff happens. And in the past 2 years, probably in the past like 9 months, I've come up with a thing for book 3 that's going to tie that stuff from book 1 in.
Oh, excellent.
And I think it works. I'm still tightening some of the screws, but I think the mechanics of what I have in mind works, and I hope people like it. I think they will. I think it's neat. I think it's a neat bit of business, and it'll make people that have been following the whole time maybe want to go back and be like, wait a minute. And I think it should work. There might be a couple of glitches because I'm only human, but it should work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Something I can't even say what it is. Spoil. I can't. Book 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So she had. Oh, let me back up. So
sure.
Let me tell you what she liked about book 1.
Okay.
She liked the dragon fight.
I did too. Thank you, Madison.
And she really liked it when Pix turned into the bunny that I think I mentioned before.
That whole sequence is probably my favorite in the book. Is the animal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. She really likes the details that you put in, and one thing specifically that she pointed out to me was during the dragon fight, Pix takes off one of her shoes, the magic pair of shoes that she got in the book.
Yeah.
And when she throws it at the dragon, she loved how you showed in those 3 inset panels the shoe flying through the air.
Madison is a very sharp, astute. Like she's picking up on some sequential art business. So good on you, Madison. Thank you. That's a little like playing with time, right? Like it creates a sense of slow motion when you have those inset panels of the shoe sort of spinning through the air. Otherwise, you just get one panel of a shoe flying through the air. You're going to read it in a snap. So be proud of that young lady. She's smart. She's a smart cookie.
When we were discussing this, we were in the car. The whole family was, and she told me that, and I turned to my wife, and my wife's driving. I'm in the passenger seat, and I put my hand up to my mouth to hide it from Madison, and I said to my wife, "I love that girl."
No, that's it's a keen observation of visual storytelling, which, on the one hand, much like lettering or everything else, you don't want to be noticed, right? You want it to just feel like you're in the story. You're sort of, but it's nice for when somebody notices something that you intentionally, put in there to create a sense of pacing and a sense of time and capture that moment of the shoe flying through the air. So yeah, cool. What didn't she like? Is there a list of what she didn't like?
No, she didn't say anything about what she didn't like. Oh, well, I could extrapolate something. I'll get to that in a second. Okay. But I want to say, I have a quote for you. She said that the book and by extension you are very creative and interesting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll take it every day. I love a nice compliment, especially from a reader. So thank you, Madison. Again, I feel like if you title your episodes, this one could be called "Thank You, Madison." But you don't title. You just give them numbers, right?
No, I give a description.
Okay.
Basically, what it's about.
Right.
I'm not as creative as some of my podcasting peers
you don't need
with
to
the titles.
Every episode. It's fine. it's hardly worth it.
Yeah. She did also ask, how did Pix find out about her being a fairy princess? She'll find that out in book 2.
Well, it's a question as to whether she is or not. So she believes she is.
Right.
So why she thinks that, you find that out in book 2.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so since I'm talking about that, so that's the by extension, because what she doesn't like is that she can't read book 2 just yet.
Got it.
So I told her that you sent me the advanced PDF for that, and she's like, at first she was like, "Ooh, when can I read it?" And I'm like, "You can't. You got to wait till May 3rd."
I mean, I will give you permission if you wanted to read the PDF, but if you want her to wait, it's 3 weeks away.
Yeah,
but
that's what I said.
If you want to hand her, put her in front of a screen and have her read it, she is welcome to.
Okay.
I'm interested in supporting the people who were supportive of the book when it was self-published. So you are one of those people. You reviewed the book without me even getting in touch with you, so you have a free pass to show that PDF to Madison.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
she will appreciate that very much.
No sweat. But she just can't spoil it for all her. She has to let her
Right.
friends. Yeah.
Right. And then she the final question she had for you: do you have other books like PIX that she could read?
That I've made, not exactly. I guess the X Babies book, although I don't even know if that's still in print, but I would certainly say that's a fun book to read that she might get a kick out of. Beyond that, I could recommend other people's books, but unfortunately, I've only done so many books, and they take a long time to make.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have. I mean, SpongeBob comics. There's gonna be some SpongeBob comics collections, but that's not entirely the same thing. So yeah, of my books, there's just the 2 PIX books at the moment, and I like the encouragement to do more. So give me time, Madison. Give me time, and then you'll be told. But we'll do what we can.
I don't know, Greg. I've been reading comics for almost 40 years now, so
Sure. No, I understand.
I'm hoping that see, I've raised now or in the process of raising four girls, 2 sets of them, and Madison's the only one where comics seem to have caught on.
Right.
So I encourage that as much as possible with her, and I think in part for books such as yours, it makes my job a lot easier to have these kind of things
Happy to help.
available.
I more say that at certain points, people age out of a certain type of book.
Yeah.
Not that she won't read comics. I hope she reads comics forever, but she may want to read, Sandman, because that, or Giant Days, or I'm trying to think of other like next level up books that Saga. She like takes a big leap to Saga or something.
Ooh, yeah. Maybe in a few years.
Yeah,
read
that's
that
what I mean. You have to, you start somewhere and then you slowly you age up and start reading more and more sophisticated stuff as you get older. So yeah, I'll try and get that 3rd book done. I gotta make some money first, but then if books 1 and 2 take off, then it'll be much easier to jump into book 3.
Yeah.
To talk about like the nerdy business stuff of it all.
Right. But one of the things I wanted to perhaps put a bug in your ear about was when I was reading book 1, and when Madison asked me that, or wanted me to convey that question to you, the first thing I thought of was it seemed like just based on the characters within PIX, you could pull some of those out into their own books, like the whole Noah and Bonus, for example.
Sure,
that'd be a great spin-off.
Sure.
I would love to see more of these dragons, outside of PIX.
Sure.
That whole dragon conflict that you described in those few pages, I was like, wow, this is awesome.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and there's a bunch of stuff in book 2 where, whether somebody's complaining about something that happened, 2 years ago at school. Like, I like doing, like, sort of peppering in these, like, there's that one where she's talking to the student government people. And like, well, the elections happened, but you were all fighting some, this clown monster. Like, those things are ideas for stories, obviously. So no, I appreciate that. It's the trick of it is all this stuff takes time to write it, to draw it, and as a one-man operation, it takes a good amount of time. So if the fates are so gracious upon me that somebody's like, we like this thing and we want to turn it into a cartoon series or something, then the gates open, because then it's like, let's tell all these stories. Let's do an episode about dragons. Why not? Like, we can do, but that's so pipe dreamy. That's like next level pipe dreamy. Or if I just had like a ton of money so I could pay people to tell these stories. But again, that's pipe dreamy stuff. Like, for now, it's me just doing these. I got these 3 books. I have this story, and I think based on the things you're saying so far, I think you and Madison might like book 3 based on what I have in mind for it.
Great.
Yeah.
That is excellent news.
Assuming nothing changes.
Okay, so it took approximately, you said, about 18 months to do book 2?
Yeah, it's frustrating to say, but yeah. But that's also because I was doing other jobs in between, and
right.
Yeah. So it was like 5 months of writing. Like, I wrote a draft, and then I did 4 rewrites on it, and that involves like recomposing pages and redoing stuff. And then I started drawing in March of 2016, and I finished coloring in March of 2017. I turned the book in and finished coloring in March of 2017. So yeah, full year of just generating based on layouts, penciling, inking, lettering, coloring, designing, making changes. Yeah, it's a long time.
So I can't imagine working on something that long.
It was also a long book. Book 1 was 120 pages. Book 2 is 200.
Yeah.
So arguably I want to try and make 3 a little less than 200 pages just to make it less of a burden on me. I worry that there's too much story I want to pack in there, but I think I can.
So do you anticipate then a similar timeline for between book 2 and book 3, or is that fully dependent on the sales of book 2?
It's fully dependent on me completely. So, I mean, I need to do a little bit of paying work to just fill up my bank account so that I can afford to take the time to work on a book 3. I need to write book 3, which I'm still coming off of book 2. So I suppose at a certain point I'm going to start writing down the ideas and stuff for book 3, and then it'll start sort of gelling into a story. And then I could make some kind of prediction of when. I'd like to think I could do it in the next 2 years. So it's like, not such a long lag, maybe sooner. Like, for instance, if these books took off like wildfire and I actually started making money from them, then that would be certainly a much more bigger incentive to really jump on the 3rd book, because people are hungry for it. On the other hand, if the reception is fine, which is perfectly fine for me, I'm not, you know what I mean? It's like, if anybody's reading the book, I'm thrilled. But it'll be a balancing act of, if the book isn't making money yet, I need to make money. And then balance making money with creating this next book and trying to get other things off the ground so that Madison has other choices. If I get some other books going, things like that. Because I have I have a list of ideas. The ideas, they don't stop. So it's like, ideally I can do some of these things, maybe not as comics, maybe as illustrated novels or whatever. I just need to find that through line and figure out and see if somebody would publish it. That gets into the very complicated world of, just because you've done a thing doesn't mean you get to keep doing it. You have to just keep selling a new thing every time. And Image is publishing this, but that doesn't mean that every publisher is going to want whatever I'm doing. It's like there's a lot of throwing yourself at the mercy of the court again and again and again, unless I keep self-publishing, and that is its own mercy of the court, because I did it and I would do it again, but that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of money out of pocket. Not to keep talking about money, but it becomes very expensive, which is why I'm very grateful for Image Comics, because by virtue of them publishing the book, I don't have to crowdfund or do anything like that to help get the second book done, because a 200-page book costs more than a 120-page book. Believe it or not, more pages cost more money, and then they weigh more, so shipping is more.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a whole. So by going through Image, I've been able to keep the price at $12.99, which I'm very happy for. Hopefully it'll mean more people buy it because it won't be too expensive, and it's a whole business thing.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, regardless of where or however book 3 and other things beyond that get published, Gregg, I'll definitely be supporting your work, because I really like it.
I appreciate it. It's on me to not tell everybody what I have in mind for book 3, because I want to.
Yeah.
But I learned a long time ago, the second I start doing that, the drive to actually make the book sort of gets lessened, because I'm getting that dopamine hit of telling the story by telling the story. So if I have to keep myself from doing that. I actually talked about this on one of my podcast Stuff Said. When I had Scotty Young on, we talked about that idea of telling the story verbally, satisfying the itch of telling a story, and you have to sort of curb that instinct to make you have to tell the story. Because telling you a story one-on-one is great, but the goal is to tell more people the same stories. You put it on paper, you send it out into the world, and hope the world sees it and enjoys it.
Yeah. Well, since I've been talking to you, I think just over an hour, Gregg, and I should let you go really soon, but I have just a few more questions if you don't mind.
Bring all your questions. If we want to if you want, we can go into like rapid fire mode. I can try to answer them faster.
Okay.
And not blather on. You tell me what you want to do. I don't want to leave you. Like if we were having a meal, I want you to be full. I want you to walk and be like, oh my God, I can barely breathe. I'm so full of conversation.
So full of Schigiel.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Since you mentioned it, not only do you write, you draw, you ink, you color, you letter. I'm missing something here. You have your own website where you have a bunch of different things going on. You also host not one but two podcasts.
True.
So you've got, as you mentioned, Stuff Said,
Yes.
which is a conversation show between you and other comic book creators and the like.
Yes. It was the original sort of catchphrase was the show where I, Gregg Schigiel, working cartoonist, talk to people in the world of comics, cartooning, and beyond.
Yes.
I did that a show a month for 4 years, and then I put the show on hiatus, and now it sort of comes out when I get to them. And I feel like it needs a new slug line. I've not figured out what that new slug line is, but I now that the book is done, I actually want to do new episodes of that, try some different things out. So I just need to. I put one out in, was it January? The Chris Eliopoulos one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just need to reach out to some people and, just get my brain in the place where I start recording shows again. Because I do love doing that show. And I'm trying to do it where it's less taxing on me, because I would do research and edit. So I'm trying to just sort of, much like the shift in working on PIX from really making tight, enclosed lines to just keeping loose, energetic lines, I'm trying to do that now with the podcast. And part of that comes from my experience with my other show. I'll beat you to the punch on this one.
Okay.
Which is Cruisin Together, which is the show where myself and my co-host Chris Girusso, who does the G-Man comics, we endeavored to and successfully watched every Tom Cruise movie in order, and we quote-unquote talk about them with a new guest for every movie. And I say quote-unquote because, as it turns out, over the course of, I guess it was 30-odd movies, 40 movies, I always push to follow the digressions, and Chris liked to talk about the movies, and that becomes its own entertaining dynamic on the show.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about it.
So that show is ridiculously fun. It's so unstructured and silly, and that helped me sort of get my head into the place where I could do Stuff Said a little less structured and sort of trust my own instincts to have a conversation without reading everything that person has done and worrying about editing ums and uhs. Just talk, see what happens. So that's the goal, and I need to reach out to some people, and then I have some other shows where I just want to tell stories, because people did like those episodes, and there's some stories I want to tell and try some new things.
Oh yeah, see that. So Stuff Said, I love Stuff Said.
Thank you.
I'm a huge fan of listening to people who work in the industry talk about their craft. What you do, how you do it, how do they do it, and just that synergy between the two of you discussing those topics. I gotta love that stuff.
Thank you.
And of course, your entertaining stories about your time at Marvel, and those were a lot of fun to listen to. That kind of the insider baseball type of stuff.
Right.
That's always entertaining.
Yeah, every now and again I flirt with the idea of doing some kind of like comic book Babylon stuff where you tell some gossipy stories, and I've never pushed that button, but I still think about it all the time, like seeing if anybody wants to come on and do like a voice disguise thing and just tell some sort of story, because there's something compelling about that.
Yeah.
Do I want to be a gossip monger? I don't know. If I could confirm that the story is true, I feel like I would be like, yeah, come on and tell the story. It's a true story. We're protecting our identity, kind of thing. I do play with that idea a lot, because there are true stories that nobody knows, and if it's a true story, is it gossip? I guess it could be.
I guess it depends on how you present it.
Yeah. So I do play with that sometimes too, because some days I'm like, I'll go there, whatever. So we'll see.
Well, see, and that's the other thing I like about your shows, Greg, and just the other podcasts that I've listened to where you've been on, and now talking with you. You seem to have a fearless quality about you that I like a lot.
I'm going to try and keep that in mind, because there are moments where I am racked with fear and anxiety. It's funny you say that, because I think of myself as somebody who is lacks in certain confidences, I
Mm.
think the difference is when I'm talking about comics, when I'm having these kinds of conversations, I feel very in my element. And it's easier for me to just say whatever I'm thinking than try and hem and haw and sort of work around stuff. But if you ask me questions about wine, I got nothing. I couldn't tell you anything. Like there are areas that I've just completely awful and lack all the confidence in the world. But so when I worked at Marvel, I would walk around clipboard in hand and sort of do the job. And the aforementioned Chris Giruso would comment that I was I was brimming with confidence. I'm like, you have no idea what's happening in this brain, like the degrees of sort of tricks I'm doing where I'm talking myself out of things. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I have I mean, I wouldn't call it a clinical anxiety, but I'm certainly a almost not entirely stereotypical, but I'm certainly in the anxious Jew spectrum for sure. There's no question about it. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because I have a friend who he went to school for sequential art. He and I have been friends since grade school, and we've talked over the years about this very thing. You know, where I'm just impressed as hell at his ability to draw something on a page where there was just a blank piece of paper. You know,
Yeah.
minutes before. And he's basically said the same thing that you just said to me many times about how insecure he feels about his abilities, how he second guesses himself all the time about the work he's doing, etc.
I mean, we are all our own worst enemies, right? Nobody's meaner to you than yourself. And then this also came up in the conversation with Scotty Young. There's this idea of the work we do never looks real to ourselves. Like you look at it like this, and I think it's because we know how it was made, and you just can't. It's almost like when you hear your voice. I mean, now we do podcasts, so we're used to our own voices. But when you first hear your voice or you see yourself on film, you're like, that looks weird. It's that kind of thing. So you create this book, and then you look at it, and it doesn't quite look like all the other comics because you're either too close or whatever it is. It's different than imposter syndrome. It just doesn't. The phrasing we were using that it just doesn't feel like it's real, even though it's very real. I mean, I'm holding it in my hand. It's right here, and all the pages are there, and I drew all those pages. But there's just it looks different than a comic I look at that I didn't draw.
Right.
And I don't know. The only way to explain it is when you hear your own voice or you see yourself on video. Yeah.
That's the perfect analogy, I think. Yeah.
So I think there's part of that too, and it's. I wouldn't even consider that a lack of confidence. It's more just like there's a dissonance there and then there is I mean, there are moments where you're not sure if what you're doing is any good. You're working in a vacuum. Are people going to like this twist or this turn or what have you? Like again, we're our own worst enemy all the time. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a few more questions, Greg. Let's see here.
Don't worry about it. Ask the questions. It's cool.
All right. So, well, since you just mentioned that about working in a vacuum, we talked about the time it took for you to do book one and now book two. You're I think just on the precipice of starting book three.
A little farther from the precipice. It's all in my head,
okay.
But I've not sat down and started doing anything. I'm gonna tour a little bit on book two. Do some conventions and that sort of thing. And again, I want to get some paying work under my belt, sort of take a little time away before going back into that world, like in a physical sense. Like mentally, it's all sort of swirling around. But once I sit down and start writing, so the way I write is I start with just a blank sheet of paper and I just write sort of key moments that I want to happen and start breaking down the chapters that way. And then once I have that list of stuff and I start working out the mechanics, then I start laying the book out. And I lay the entire book out in one shot. It takes a while. So I knowing what it takes, I need to build a head of steam before I do that again. And there are other things I want to pitch around and try and get going. So, I'm doing a little bit of mental juggling at the moment, but it's never far from my brain because I know, especially with how I ended book two, I have to do book three.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
Yeah, I know. The original ending was even more have to do book three.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then my early readers were like, that's pretty bold of you to end with that kind of a cliffhanger.
Wow.
Yeah, that's some real bravado. I'm like, that's a fair point. And then I sort of scaled back and thought about what I was trying to do, which was do something on the level of an Empire Strikes Back, not in terms of like grandiosity and just like the greatest of the whatever people want to, but just the structure of Empire, which is, and you having read it
Yeah.
might see some where it's just like things get broken, like things get sort of scattered by the end,
Mm-hmm.
and I that is sort of the mental map I was going with, and then I was reminded that Empire Strikes Back does not end on an exact cliffhanger. It just ends with things being different. The status quo has changed, but
Right.
for the most part, everybody is still together. And I was like, that's a fair point. And I sort of went back in and reworked the ending, shaved off a few pages, and brought it down to a lean 200. Ridiculous.
So what are the, I guess, what are the greatest or top three or however you want to number it, challenges in producing a book like this? Well, I guess the sequels. So book 2, and then as we're talking about book 3 coming hopefully soon. What are the challenges that you have in relation to this? Like you said, working in a vacuum, not knowing how things, how people will receive it, what's going to be the feedback, the response you're going to get. How do you I guess work through that kind of stuff?
So the biggest challenge for me, particularly before I was on board with Image, when I was really working on this thing on my own with the goal of self-publishing it, the real challenge, and I talk about this a bit on a podcast called Lean Into Art, because the topic was grit and determination. The challenge for me really was, is this worth it? Which is to say, I did the first book. It was something I'd always wanted to do, was self-publish something. I was very proud of that book. But the reality is, it is hard to sell a book. It's hard to get that book out into the world. There are people like you who saw it in a catalog and said, this looks interesting. I'm going to check this book out. But there's a lot of unanswered emails, a lot of unanswered phone calls of trying to get people to pay attention. And it's a lot of dollars out. And then the money doesn't, even selling books through Diamond or whoever, like you don't really make that money back. And if you factor in the hours of generating the book that you didn't get paid for, it can be disheartening. On the other hand, when you get a nice review or a father sends you a photo of his daughter dressed as PIX, that lifts you up. Like that's like, oh my God, this is somebody, it hit somebody out there in the world. But we all want more, right? So I want more of that. And you don't get it, it feels a little, so then you're working on this new book, and I'm plugging along, and I'm taking 2 months off to pencil the book. And in those 2 months, I'm working all day, but there's no checks rolling in. And then I'm thinking, it's fine. It's all for the good of this book. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm going to have to pay to get this book printed. And then I went ahead and I started getting quotes on printing, and that became sort of scary. It's like, why am I doing, is anybody going to know that I'm even doing all this? That sort of mental stuff starts to happen. That's the biggest challenge. No question. It's just getting your brain to do it despite all the doubts in the world that nobody's going to care. Because the reality is there are people that care. You care. George cares. Madison cares. Like there are those people, and you just have to kind of remember it's that goofy cliche of a comedian, like if I can make one person laugh kind of a thing. It's goofy. It's not true. You want to make all the people laugh. You want to entertain all the people. You know that books sell millions of copies. You want to sell millions of copies. The reality is you probably don't. And you just have to get your brain through that and be like, somebody cares about this story. And I'm going to finish it because I made the commitment to myself. And you just it's a grin and bear it kind of thing. You just sort of knuckle it and go. And as I did the second book, it's feeding the fact that now I literally have to do the third book. Like I can't not do it. So the challenge with the third book is just going to be making it good, making it count, like sticking the landing, right? Because there's a lot of stuff I want to do with the third book, and there's a very specific tone I want to avoid and a certain kind of thing I want to achieve, and I hope I can do it. I want to keep the tone I have, but I want to tell a type of, so vague, I want to tell a type of story that I typically don't like, but I want to tell it in a tonal way that will tell that kind of story in the way that I like it to be told. I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
God, now, Gregg.
We'll talk after. I can give you a little hint of it, but I don't want to,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just the way you're talking about it is like, oh, I cannot wait to read book
Yeah, but
3
see,
now.
and then there's the problem. Right now, there's an expectation. Now there's a new challenge. Like, well, now Eric and all of his listeners have this expectation for this grand thing. And what if it's like, I want to do a story about flowers, but I want it to rhyme? Like, it could have just been that. So there, did I dash expectations?
No. This is good. Wow. So I was going to ask you another question, but you kind of already answered it for me. So I'm going to go to the I think maybe my last one for you. What? So do you read other people's comics?
Oh yeah,
comic books.
Yeah. I'm behind on a lot of my monthly comics, but I try and read.
Okay.
I try to read stuff. Yeah, I mean, I still buy comics. They stack up.
Mm-hmm.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
But yes, I do still read comics. Is the question, what am I reading?
Yeah, what are you reading? What are you reading comic book wise? What are you reading? Books, podcasts. What podcasts do you like to listen to regularly?
So books,
anything along those lines.
I'm pretty weak in books these days. Although when I was working on PIX, I was listening to some audiobooks, which was great. So I listened to. Do you hear that siren? Is that coming through on the microphone?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay,
that's all right. All
right, we'll let it ride. No, I'm just bringing up my pull list so I can tell you exactly what I'm reading. Or what I'm buying in comics. Books, what did I just listen to? I listened to the audiobook of, there were a couple of them. I listened to a Nancy Drew book because I'd never read a Nancy Drew book, but I watched the 2007 Nancy Drew movie, which is delightful.
Really?
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I think it's Netflix.
Okay.
With Emma Roberts. It's really very charming. I think you will like it if you've not seen it.
Huh.
I think it will hit.
All right.
It's gonna hit the synapses you like to have hit. You specifically are.
Okay.
And you can watch
I
with
will
Madison.
check that out.
I think she might do it too.
That's what I was thinking too.
It's really pretty charming. It got me interested enough to want to read a Nancy Drew book. But since I was working, I'm like, let's see if it's on. And my library, you can get e audiobooks. So it just downloads to an app called Overdrive, and you just play it. And,
yeah.
And then it returns when it returns. So I listened to a Nancy Drew book. I listened to Anne of Green Gables, which I've been wanting to read for years because so many cool ladies in comedy and performance love Anne of Green Gables. And I'm like, I need to know what's up with this. Anne of Green Gables is pretty great. And the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, I think that is like what Super Friends might have been for me, or what He-Man was, or G.I. Joe. I think Anne of Green Gables was that for girls. Like Anne of Green Gables and My Little Pony. And there might be another thing in there. But like there's a whole saga of these books. Like there's Anne of Green Gables, and then there's like 6 other books that just follow her life. So but she's a really charming character, that Anne Shirley. And then there's some other one. I think it was an actual adult book, and I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I did some audiobook listening. Let's see. I'm gonna bring up my pull list so I can say exactly what I'm buying, or at least some of the hits. Podcasts. I listen to a ton of comedy podcasts. To name them all would be tedious for everybody. Whatever page it is in the book.
I was going to say, they can go look at book 2, right?
Yeah. But like I listen to Dan Harmon's podcast. I listen to a podcast called Comedy Bang Bang. I listen to Paul F. Tompkins' podcast, Spontaneous Nation. There's a comedian named Lauren Lapkus. She does a podcast called With Special Guests that's really good.
Oh, yeah.
The show called The JV Club, which I like a lot. It's do you listen to that one? Or did you
no, but
recognize it? Okay. You recognize it from the bookshelf? It's the woman who did the voice of Korra in Legend of Korra. She's an actress and comedic performer. Okay. And her whole show is she talks to other women in performance stuff about their adolescent years. And that's where I've heard Anne of Green Gables come up a million times. And that's a great thing. That I listened to that while I was working on PIX. In fact, it's all going to turn around. The scene I was describing before of PIX and Reggie in the hall talking, I was drawing that while listening to her podcast, and even tweeted working on PIX stuff while listening to JV Club. And it was one of those panels in pencil. if anyone wants to go back to my Twitter feed and follow that. So yeah, a ton of podcasts, and the show called The Best Show, which used to be on WFMU, which was public radio. Now he does it as a podcast. That one's a bit of an investment, but I've been listening to that for like 7 years, and I love it. Tom Sharpling is the host. So here's the books that are on my pull list. I buy Saga. I buy Stray Bullets. I read Savage Dragon. I read Invincible. I love Invincible.
Me too.
That's a kick butt book. Paper Girls is great. I Hate Fairyland. Copperhead. I'm glad that that's back. This new book, Curse Words from Image, I like a lot. It's again it's weird, and it tickles that quirk thing going on. It's about this wizard that shows up on Earth, and his name is Wizord. And he's got this koala that he hangs out with. It's a very cool book. It's not a book for children, but it's a book for people with who like comic books to be comic booky. I really like Giant Days. I don't know if you read that, but I like that book a lot. That book to me does, and all due respect to the Archie gang, but I feel like it does what the new Riverdale stuff is trying to do better than what the new Riverdale stuff is doing.
Okay.
But it is that kind of, life following the lives of these people. They're in college. It's beautifully drawn. It's very charming. I'm way behind on Lumberjanes, but I keep buying it. The book Goldie Vance is a lot of fun. Let's see. Black Hammer at Dark Horse I like.
Mm-hmm.
Cosmic Scoundrels is a cool book by Andy Suriano, who worked on Samurai Jack and is now working on there's a new revamp of Turtles, Ninja Turtles coming on Nickelodeon. He's working on that. And I think that's the rough list. You'll notice I mentioned no Marvel or DC books because they've priced me out. Other books are $3.99 or more, or they're shipping twice a month, and I like all that stuff. But I know what it takes to make a comic book, and I've made the decision to support smaller independent stuff, and I've been okay with it so far. I think I'm going to miss some of the DC stuff. I like New Superman a lot. I like Batgirl, but they're expensive. Yeah. Invincible's still $2.99. It started as $2.95, and it went all the way up to $2.99. And it's going to be $2.99 until the book ends. That's amazing. I don't know. It can be done. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of going through that mental process myself because I buy a lot of DC. I'm just a big DC Comics fan.
DC stuff is I mean that is I've told this story before. I appreciate you not asking me how I got into comics because that's a very standard question. But I mean I watched the Super Friends and I saw the old Batman show and I fell in love with superheroes first, and they were DC superheroes first. Like those are the icons. So yeah, that stuff, as much as I don't really recognize what Batman is now, it's not the Batman that I love. Like, I still love Batman. Like, the Batman in my head, the Batman that I saw in Lego Batman, like, I love all that crap. Yeah. So, I'm all for it. Absolutely. That was a digression. But I do like that stuff. It just, I play with the idea of doing Marvel Unlimited and reading the books, 6 months behind, but there's just no time to read everything. There's too much stuff, and then the more I read and the more I watch and the more I listen to, the less I make. Right. And I need to make stuff. Yes. Yeah. Yes, you do. I know. I'm teasing, of course. I know you are, but in my take however long it takes you to do the work you do, Greg, because I will be here definitely waiting for it. Excited to read it. I loved, as I've said before on previous episodes, and I've said here too, I absolutely love book one. One Weirdest Weekend was just so much fun. It's such a delight visually and from a story standpoint. It reminds me of comics, those bygone years that when I read comics when I was much younger. That is exactly. I mean, I'm going for that in terms of I want a kid like your granddaughter to get the feelings we were having when we were 9, 10, 11, 12, and what I like to refer to as reading comics like it was our job to read comics. Yeah. And you just get sucked up and you're like, oh my God, what happened to the angel's wings? He's Archangel now? What? And you just start freaking like that. I want that to happen. And if I can get a little bit of that to happen for somebody else, then I've hit the notes I want to hit. That it worked on you, great. If it works on a kid, great. That's all. Like, that's what it's about for me to make. That's why I like making comics for younger readers, to sort of like pass that down. I've used this analogy on other podcasts before. I love the scene in Toy Story 3 where he passes the toys on to that girl so she can play with them. Like, that idea of making something so that the next generation can have some fun, as opposed to what has happened in mainstream comics, which is they keep breaking the toys to refresh them for people. Just let other kids, like, make them so other kids can enjoy them. And that's a philosophical train that left the station, and that's why we have to do independent side stuff and make something fun on the other, which is, and I thank you and other people like you who support this stuff and find it and preach it to your listeners. So thank you, sir. You're
very welcome. The accolades I'm pouring onto you are well deserved, Greg.
Well,
so
I will neither agree nor disagree.
All right. So, like I said, I love Volume 1. I can't wait. I've read it already, but I cannot wait to get that paper book in my hands, and I will gladly reread it and look for the jokes and look for the special things you've thrown in there, the homages and whatnot, and just enjoy the hell out of it. And of course, wait with bated breath for Volume 3.
Do you have plans to make banana bread with Madison? Is that on the to-do list?
Yes, actually.
Awesome.
After all the hype about Ron's banana bread in book 2, I gotta try it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
That recipe is tested.
But before book 3, of course, book 2 still has to come out.
Yeah,
and
in 3 weeks.
As of this recording, it's 3 weeks away. Yeah. It'll be May 3rd, 2017, just a few days before Free Comic Book Day, because I know a lot of people listening to this episode, like myself, will be going to their local comic shop to partake in the wonderful holiday that is Free Comic Book Day.
It is a delight.
Yeah. And what better way to support local comic shops and Mr. Gregg Schigiel than to buy PIX Too Super for School Volume 2,
or Volume 1 if you don't have it, or both,
or buy both. Buy multiple copies to give out to your loved ones.
Sure. Again, I will not fight you on that.
That's a good plan.
I love that plan. I just can't be the one to say it. I'll let you say it, and I'll just not disagree. All
right. Well, Greg, this has been a lot of fun.
I've
thank you so much.
Thank you. No, this has been lovely. So I appreciate it.
All right. Why don't you actually just remind listeners where they can go to find out more about you and your fine work and all the different places where that may be?
Oh, the places you'll go. Here we go. My main website is hatterentertainment.com, HATTER entertainment.com. That will take you to all the podcasts and all the comics. So that will take you to pixcomic.com, where Pix stuff lives. It'll take you to stuffsaidshow.com, where Stuff Said lives. But you don't have to write all this down. Just go to hatterentertainment.com. That'll take you there. And then you can follow me on Twitter or read my tweets, which is at my name, GreggSchigiel. And I don't tweet a ton. But when I do, I try and throw a nice zinger out there every now and again. And then sometimes I get caught up in some dumb thing that makes me laugh. I talked about it on George and Tony's show. I did December, where every day of December I tweeted it. I got a bear thing. I tweeted an image of a bear. I don't know what's going to come up next, but I'll come up with something when inspiration strikes. And yeah, those are the main places. I don't really do much on Facebook because I have like family on there, and that just gets weird because they end up liking everything and commenting, and you don't want to upset your family. So Twitter is better. Or you can just email me direct. Yeah, I have an email contact thing on my website. You can email me. I'll write back. Generally within a few days, right? I'm pretty good. We've emailed, right?
Oh yeah. You would sometimes email me, like literally, Greg. I was typing an email to you when you emailed me one day.
It's that psychic. It's that power. Yeah, it's something in the air. We're simpatico, man, is what it is.
All right. All right. So as Gregg said, you can email him and he'll write you back because he's great like that.
Unless you write something terrible, and then come on. Yeah.
So what you might wait a day before you write back to him? Is that
I might take it. I might take a day to just soak it all in.
Or you could also, once you listen to this episode and you have some questions, or there's things that Gregg and I did not talk about that you would like to know more about, and maybe you would, I'm more approachable because Gregg is this uber talent. You could slum it with me by, sorry.
No, please keep by all means continue. This is fascinating.
So you could always email me at longboxreview@gmail.com.
This is a nice bookend to we're all our worst enemy. We're all our own worst enemy. Yeah, you're capping it off beautifully.
Or you can also leave comments at the website longboxreview.com, or follow me on Twitter because I'm constantly checking that out. I'd love Twitter. I love being on Twitter. Mostly to read other people's tweets, but
sure.
It's a lot of fun. Anyway, so thanks again, Gregg. Thank you, George, for putting us in touch.
Props again to George. Thank you to you, Eric. Thank you, Madison.
Yes.
Thank you, Skype. Thank you, microphones and headsets.
There you go. Yep.
There's like a new version of Goodnight Moon for podcasters.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I think we should go with that one, Gregg.
That's fine by me.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.